I don't want to be panicky. I don't want to be thin skinned. I don't want to be alarmist. And I certainly don't want to be a peacenik or someone who is, I don't know, ideologically weak. But I don't think it's a sign of weakness to be concerned about a growing convergence of men and materiel and rhetoric, warlike rhetoric, when there's nuclear weapons on the other side. I just think this is unlike any other conflict in the world, the Saudi-Yemen conflict, for example, because at the end of the day, Russia has nukes. I have to tell you, I'm a little bit scared of the brinksmanship here. That's my view, but enough from me. I'd like to hear your views, and I'd like to hear them at length for our viewers.
Yes, you have a point there, Ezra. And as you know, in the legacy media, it's all about Ukraine. And if you're not pro-Ukraine, you're pro-Putin, and you're not a good Canadian. There's only one narrative, and that's great that you are bringing the other side of the story. That is very important. And actually, I was looking at a poll, I believe, a couple of days ago, and that was saying that about 21% of Canadians are looking for an agreement, a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. So 21%, it's almost a quarter of the population when you have only one narrative in the mainstream media. So imagine if these mainstream media were able to be more neutral in that war. I believe that percentage will have been a little bit higher. That being said, it is not, in our history, in our culture here in Canada to be pro-war. And I'm looking at what is happening, like you said, in Parliament in Ottawa. All these establishment political parties, including the NDP, we must think that the NDP of Ed Broadbent and Jack Layton were for peace at that time, but not right now with their new leader. They're with Trudeau, like the Conservative. But, when you have a country like Russia, who's having the nuclear power, it's very, very dangerous. And now we are seeing the US that are saying they will give more ammunition, more equipment, and we are doing the same thing. And here in Canada, as you may know, we gave about $4 billion to Ukraine. We are broke, and we are giving money away and equipment. Our Canadian forces didn't have the right equipment right now, and we are giving our equipment to Ukraine. It's not our war. And, I'm looking in the past like Jean Chrétien, when the US wanted us to be part of the war in Iraq, and Chrétien said, no, there's no UN Security Council decision on that. I won't participate in that war. Same thing like in the 1950s, during the Suez crisis, the Canal of Suez crisis in the 1950s, our country was a peacemaker, and we were not part of that conflict. So there's a lot of precedent, historical precedent. And now we didn't have any debates in Parliament in Ottawa about the position of our country. And we are making Russia an enemy of our country when Russia is our neighbor. And I must admit, Ezra, that I'm more scared about China than Russia. So we, the PPC, we have a position that is for peace and prosperity. And I said that in the beginning of that conflict. It is not our conflict. And usually, Ukraine is not a member of NATO. We are a member of NATO. And being a member of NATO, we have the obligation to help other countries, other members' countries, when a war happens. But Ukraine is not part of NATO, and we are there fighting against Russia. It's a proxy war for me between the US and Russia. And, 80% of the world is looking at that. So there's no unanimity like the mainstream media try to tell us all over the globe that everybody is pro-Ukraine. No, it's more complicated than that. And I believe that it is not our war. And I'm a little bit scared about what can happen in the near future because of the nuclear weapons that Russia has. So we don't know what can happen, and our role must be to try to have a ceasefire and try to promote peace and prosperity. But I'm the only one in Canada as the leader of a national political party that is saying that.
You know, I remember when Canada wanted to be the fair dealer, the middleman, the peace broker. You know, that was a stance that Canada took sometimes in Middle Eastern entanglements. And peacekeeping was our forte. You don't hear a lot of talk about either of those things now. You know, it's interesting you mentioned that there was no debate, let alone a vote in Parliament. I remember when the United States deposed Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And Muammar Gaddafi did not have nuclear weapons. He was actually easy pickings. I think that that's been a terrible, there have been terrible consequences. I think that started a massive migration crisis in Europe. I think it helped start a lot of terrorists and open air slave markets again. I think terrible things have come. Canada had a small role in that. I think we sent one ship and had some planes. Stephen Harper was the prime minister of the day, if I recall. He allowed a debate in Parliament, which is more than I think Trudeau has done here. And I think he allowed a vote. I'm going from memory. You might remember better than me. And I remember Elizabeth May of the Green Party was against it. And I have many disagreements with her, but that is the Green point of view. Peace. Yeah. Let's solve things. Let's not just smash things. And I guess the reason I refer to that is because I think Stephen Harper was under enormous pressure to go along with the U.S., even though Libya really isn't our quarrel. But he went along in the most minimal way, like deploying a ship, and there were no troops on the ground. There was no risk to Canadians. There was no risk of nuclear missiles being lobbed at us. There was a debate. I think Canada went along in a grudging way, but it was enough for the United States to say, okay, our ally Canada was there with us. We didn't lose face. But what's happening under Trudeau is very different. No vote, no debate, serious commitment of money and military equipment. And most importantly, there is a risk that Russia will respond not just to Ukraine, but outside that theater of war. What happened, not just to Trudeau, but what happened to the left? Where is the Elizabeth May of 2023 voting against this war? Or at least speaking against the war? Where's all the peaceniks?
You're right about that. And I believe that they are pro-war, the Green and the NDP and, liberals and conservative, because of the propaganda machine. I believe that the legacy media were very good to be 100% pro-Ukraine, and it was very popular. And so if you're a member of parliament in the opposition, you want to be with the majority. And still today, a majority of Canadians are okay with that war. So they're not able to have the other point of view in front of them. So that's why you have a huge majority for that war and for the participation of our country in that war. And these politicians don't have any conviction, and they're following, the majority of the population. But, if you're a leader, you must lead. And you must have strong ideas and try to present them these ideas to Canadians. And that is what we are doing. It's not popular. That position about being pro peace and prosperity and for a diplomatic solution, that solution is not popular. But I believe that if you look at the history and if you look at that conflict with what happened the last couple of months, that must be the position. And I was pleased to see in France, there's a couple of former diplomats that said, it's a long war and it's a little bit too long and it's very dangerous. We must find a way to get out of that war. And, these territories, like you said, Donbass and Crimea, they were under different jurisdictions the last 200 years. So we must have a discussion with other countries about that, and maybe these territories will stay with Russia, and we need to have as soon as possible that ceasefire. But what we are doing, we, the West, we are pushing, like you said in the beginning, we are pushing Russia in the arms of China, and our, sanctions, financial sanctions, were not efficient. The ruble went to the roof. The economy is going well in Russia, and now they're dealing and selling their oil and gas to other countries in Middle East and in China. So if you look at the situation, the global situation, the political situation in the West and East and with China, it's a big mess because of the participation of the US and us in that war.
That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.